Hello and welcome to video lesson 5 from week 7. This week we will need unit 5 to talk about the past simple, a new tense. First of all, take your workbook. You need unit 5, once upon a time, and you need to take your workbook on page 194 to start. Okay. First of all, I want you to read the text. It is an interview with the grandmother of Katie O'Grady. She will interview her grandmother and the grandmother will talk about her past. You read the text first and then afterwards you answer the questions. Therefore, you go to page 197 where you can see 8 questions about that text. Make sure to write sentences to answer these questions. So don't just write words or parts of sentences, but write full sentences with a subject, a verb en some extra information. Dus zorg dat de echte zinnen zijn. Zorg voor een onderwerp, zorg voor een werkwoord, zorg dat het zinnen zijn met alles erop en eraan. Dat is belangrijk. So pause here to do that. Okay, now you've read the text. Let's have a look at the answers to the questions. The first question was, when did Catherine O'Grady live with her aunt? She lived with her aunt in 1939. Now, when did she get married? She got married when the bombing of Pearl Harbor took place. When did she stop working at Gibson's? When her husband went into the army. Where was her baby when she was at work? The baby was in a nursery. What food was easy to find? It was chicken that was easy to find. If you're correcting, don't forget to use a color to indicate that you corrected something. Also, when you haven't written full sentences, make sure that you have full sentences afterwards. Second part, question 6 up to 8. How did people at home get news about the war? They used to listen to the radio. How did they celebrate the end of the war? They had a big victory parade. And when did things change for women? Things changed after the war. As you might have noticed, there is a different tense used here, different from the ones we know so far, or we have talked about so far. So when I'm talking about tenses, werkwoordsteden, then you already talked about present tenses. But here, this text is about the past. I want you to take page 198 and I want you to take a highlighter and highlight all the verbs that you can find in this piece of text. So pause here to highlight the verbs in this text. Verbs, werkwoorden. Now let's have a look at where you can find verbs in this text. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, I climbed, de verleden tijd van het werkwoord to climb, climbed, klimmen, the familiar narrow stairway at my grandma's house. In 1939, I lived, ik woonde, in East Providence with my aunt. I worked, ik werkte, at Gibson's. I stopped working at Gibson's. Ik stopte met werk. When the war started, They needed wool very badly. We worried about our men. Maybe you highlighted working as well, maar hier gaat het om een activiteit en we hebben het natuurlijk specifiek over die werkwoorden die natuurlijk in de verleden tijd staan. In the answers that we wrote down on page 197, you also find a lot of verbs in the past tense. She lived, Pearl Harbor took place, her husband went into the army, the baby was in a nursery, chicken was easy to find, they used to listen to the radio, they had, well, used to listen is a special form, and we're going to talk about that. They had a big victory parade, and things changed after the war. When we talk about the past simple, we have regular verbs and irregular verbs. But before we have a look at those irregular verbs, onregelmatige werkwoorden, gaan wij het deze week eerst hebben over de basis. Ja, dus we gaan eerst starten met de basis, daarna voegen we toe, maar we gaan beginnen met de absolute basis van deze werkwoordstijd. Using the information. So you highlighted verbs in exercise 7 on page 198 and what I just mentioned. Use that to complete the grammar box on page 198. So pause here to do so. Let's have a look. So, after you highlighted all these verbs in the text in exercise 7, you've noticed that past simple verbs are formed by combining your infinitive with ed. So I climbed the stairway, and it is used for all the other forms as well. So singular, plural are all the same form. To form a past simple, as you can write down there, we use the infinitive plus ed for all forms. Careful there. Sometimes that is not possible. As you can see, it works, for example, for climbed and worked, but it doesn't work for lived. Daar lukt dat niet. Gewoon ed toevoegen, want anders zou ik live, dubbele e, en dan een d hebben. Dat is hier niet het geval. Er zijn dus een paar spellingsregels. We beginnen met de eerste. If the infinitive ends in the letter e, for example here, to live, I just add a d to my infinitive to make a past form. Yeah. If the infinitive ends in a consonant, consonant is een medeklinker, followed by the letter y, I replace my y with ied. For example, worried, worry, to worry, die infinitief eindigt op een y. Ik vervang mijn y door ied. Pas op, it has to be a consonant followed by the letter y, because when I have, for example, enjoy, which also ends in a y, then I just use ed because here you have a vowel in front of the letter y. Hier staat er een klinker voor de y, dus is deze regel niet van toepassing. Het moet een medeklinker plus y zijn. Dus denk niet meteen als je een y ziet staan, oh, ik moet hier ied gebruiken. Nee, dat is niet altijd het geval. De laatste regel, the last rule. It seems a bit complicated, but it isn't. Let's have a careful look at it. So if the infinitive ends in one. 1. Stressed, benadrukt. Vowel, klinker. Followed by one consonant, medeklinker. We double the final consonant before we add ed. I'll give an example. For example, stop. If we look at the verb to stop, I have one, the O, stressed, benadrukt, stop. Daar ligt de nadruk op de O. Dat kan ook niet anders. Er is maar één, het is een kort woord, dus er is maar één lettergreep. Dat is sowieso benadrukt. A single or one stressed vowel, 1 benadrukte klinker, de O, followed by one consonant, ja, de P. Then I double the final consonant and I add ed. Dus stopped, stop wordt stopped. Dat is bijvoorbeeld niet het geval bij discover. Discover heeft meerdere lettergrepen en er staat wel, als we dan gaan kijken naar de infinitief, staat er op het einde van mijn infinitief inderdaad 1 medeklinker, ja, maar daarvoor staat er ook een klinker, maar die is niet benadrukt. Mijn nadruk, zoals hier aangegeven wordt door het streepje, mijn nadruk ligt op mijn O. Vandaar, het ligt niet op mijn laatste klinker voor mijn medeklinker. Ja, dus ik moet hier niet gaan verdubbelen. Let's have a look. When do I use my past simple? We already talked about present tenses. For example, the present simple. I usually drink coffee. Let hier op het woord usually. Dat was voor routines en gewoontes. Normaal gezien drink ik koffie. Present continuous hebben we ook al gezien. Gaat ook over, is ook een present tense. Is ook een werkwoordstijd die gebruikt wordt in het heden, in het nu. Maar voor dingen die op dit eigenste moment aan het gebeuren zijn. Now. I am drinking tea now. The past simple is our first tense to talk about the past. Spreekt over het verleden. I hated coffee 10 years ago. En dit is een woord, of een reeks woorden, die erop wijst dat het in het verleden gebeurd is. Dat zijn hier die possible time indicators. Dus als ik dat lees, dan kan ik daar een past simple in herkennen. Of kan ik weten dat ik een past simple moet gebruiken. So, we use the past simple to talk about actions that happened in the past. Je ziet voorlopig maar één werkwoordstijd in de verleden tijd. Dus je kan hier nog niet gaan mixen met andere werkwoordstijden. We hebben hier enkel de past simple. Let's practice. So, that was the basic idea of the past simple. Now, I want you to have a look at exercise 8 on page 199. There you see a text. In that text, you see 14 blue infinitives. I want you to put all those verbs, all those infinitives, in the past simple form. If necessary, use your grammar box. Go and have a look at your grammar box. When you're in doubt, look at how your infinitive ends. Kijk naar de uitgang van uw infinitief om te kunnen bepalen hoe je die verleden tijd moet schrijven. Ja. Pause here to prepare that. First, I need to mention, you only fill out the verb forms. En je ziet daar zo kolommetjes staan met id, t en d. Daar hoef je nog niet naar te kijken. Dat is voor straks. Eerst gewoon focussen op de spelling van uw verleden tijd, uw vormen in de verleden tijd. Dus pauzeer hier om dat voor te bereiden. Let's have a look at the correction of this exercise. As you can see, I put the rules for the formation of the past simple below. I start with the general rule, so to just add ed to your infinitive, and then the 3 other spelling rules, so we can apply them to your answers. Make sure to use a color here to indicate your mistakes. I was 17 years old. It was 1940 and my family and I lived in a small village. So live becomes lived. My infinitive ends in an E. I just have to add a D. So that's rule number 1, spelling rule number 1. Our lives changed. Same rule applies there. Spelling rule number 1. When American soldiers arrived in the village. Again, I just add a D. The girls in the village loved them. Same rule here as well. We watched. There I have the general rule. So watch plus ed, and waved whenever they walked by. For waved, it is the first spelling rule. Walked is my general rule, mijn algemeen regeltje. Then 8. The soldiers always greeted us back. General rule. They were so different from English boys. They talked to us and their conversations were very interesting. The parties were extraordinary. I enjoyed dancing very much. Maybe you can make a mistake here by thinking that it ends in a Y. So maybe you thought about spelling rule number 2. But if we have a look at enjoy, infinitive of enjoy, I see indeed that it ends in a Y, but before my Y there isn't a consonant, but there is a vowel. Dus er staat geen medeklinker voor mijn Y, maar een klinker. Dus hier gewoon algemene regel. Then one Saturday I danced with Frank, spelling rule number 1. From that moment on I started dreaming, general rule. He was the man of my life. He asked me out every weekend and eventually we married after the war. Here the spelling rule, the second spelling rule does apply because I have to marry, which ends in a Y. Before my Y, I have a consonant. Er staat een medeklinker R voor mijn Y. Vandaar gebruik ik hier wel IED. This slide is about the pronunciation of the final sound of your past form. You can find this on page 199 below. So we pronounce the ed as a T when my verb ends in the sound K, F, S, SH or P. For example, I worked at Gibson's, I relaxed in the evenings. Now I'm exaggerating a bit, of course, but when my verb ends in this sound, then I should pronounce it as a T. You can remember it, for example, with the word coffee shop, where you have the sounds that you should use here or that you need here. Dat is een ezelsbruggetje dat je kan gebruiken. We pronounce ed as id when my verb ends in a T or a D. When the war started, we needed wool badly. And in all other cases, so most verbs, we pronounce it as a D. I climbed the stairway, we worried about our men. Let's try. So I, for exercise 8, I told you to prepared the spelling part first, so you had to write down the verb forms. Now I want you to tick off the ending sounds. I'm going to pronounce the forms once more, and you have to indicate what. So we had lived, changed, arrived, loved, watched, waved, walked, greeted, talked, enjoyed, danced, started, asked, married. And if you indicated all of them, this is what you should have in front of you. Again, use a color to indicate your mistakes. Then, if you did so, take pictures of page 197, page 198, and 199. Make sure that I can see your corrections and upload them on Smart School. If you have any questions about this, please don't hesitate to contact us. If you revised your grammar and everything's clear to you, so when you prepare the exercises, when you listen to this whole video and everything's clear to you, you go to exercises on Smart School and you complete the exercise that you can find there about the past simple. Don't forget to submit in the end. Vergeet niet om op indienen te klikken op het eind. The deadline this week is Wednesday, 20th of May. It's on a Wednesday this week because Thursday and Friday you have a day off. So it's a bit earlier than usually. So make sure that you don't miss the deadline.